Welcome back to Inside the Philippines. Take a seat, get comfortable, because this one is different from most of what we cover here. His name is Björn. He's 63 years old, from Trondheim in Norway, and he spent 41 years of his life on roofs, up ladders, in the rain, in the wind coming off the fjord, doing the kind of work that eventually takes your shoulder and both your knees and hands them back to you in pieces. Now, normally, when a man loses money in the Philippines, we tell you a story about someone who didn't do his homework, someone who fell fast, sent money quick, believed what he wanted to believe. That's the usual shape of it. Björn is not that man. Björn did his homework. Björn did more homework than any human being you have ever met in your life. He built a spreadsheet, an actual spreadsheet, with columns and filters and formulas. He logged 1,000 profiles, 1,000, over 9 months, before he ever sent a single message to a single woman. He sat in a flat in Norway and studied the pattern like a man studying a roof he hasn't been asked to fix yet. And he found the pattern. That's the thing. He found a real one. He can show you the numbers. And then he walked straight into the exact thing he built the whole system to protect himself from. There was money. There was a family. There was a house going up on land he could never legally own. And there was something waiting at the end of it that no column in any spreadsheet could have caught. A piece of paper, 20 years old, in a country where marriage doesn't end. I'll say this before we start, because it matters. Björn isn't a fool. If he was a fool, this would be a much shorter video, and you'd have heard it before. What makes this one worth an hour of your time is that he was careful. He was careful, and it made no difference at all. And he spent the last year trying to understand why. Here's his story. In his own words. 41 years I was on the roofs. You have to understand what that means in Trøndelag. It is not roofing like you have in a warm country. The rain comes sideways. The wind comes off the fjord, and it finds you. In November, you are on a pitch of 35 degrees with wet slate under your boots, and you are thinking about one thing only, which is where your weight is. That's it. That's the whole job. Where is your weight? And is the thing under it going to hold? And you learn a philosophy from that. You don't decide it. It just gets put into you, like water into a wall. Measure twice, then measure again, because the first 2 times you were tired. Inspect what you didn't build yourself, because the man who built it is not standing here, and you are. And never, never trust a man's estimate if he was not on the roof. If he stood in the road and looked up and told you a number, that number is a story. It is not a measurement. 41 years of that. I was good. I'll say it plainly. I was very good. And I don't have much else, so I'll take it. Then my shoulder went. Then the knees. 61 years old, and the doctor tells me, in that voice they use, that I have a choice between the ladder and walking, and I can't have both. So I stopped. And here is the thing nobody tells you about retirement when your whole life has been a body that works. There is no next thing. There is a room. That's what retirement was for me. A room with nothing in it. I would wake up at 5:30, because that is when a roofer wakes up, and I would stand in the kitchen, and it would be dark for another 3 hours, and there was nothing. Nothing to measure. Nothing to hold my weight. Then my mother died. I'm not going to tell you the whole business with the inheritance. It's not interesting, and I come out of it badly, and I know that. I'll tell you the shape of it. There was an argument in my sister's kitchen. I was right about the money. I still think I was right about the money, and I said things, To my brother, mostly, but there was enough to go around. And the thing about things said in a kitchen is that they don't stay in the kitchen. They just sit there, in the air, forever. My brother stopped answering. Then my sister. Then my 2 nephews, who I taught to fish, both of them, on a boat I don't own anymore. Then the cousins, the ones who used to come at Christmas and eat everything and stay too late, and I used to complain about them, actually. I used to genuinely complain to my wife about them before she left, and then they stopped coming too. And it turns out, I would give a great deal to have them back eating everything and staying too late. 2 Christmases. That's what I have from that. 2 Christmases in the flat in Trondheim with the lights off. Not because I was being dramatic. Because if the lights are on, the neighbor knocks. And she's a kind woman, Ingrid. And she would have had me sit at her table with her family, and I could not have survived that. So, lights off, sit in the chair, the bells from Nidaros going, and the neighbor's television through the wall, and me in the dark with a plate of cold food, 62 years old. And in my account, 1.2 million kroner, about $115,000, if you want it in your money. I had never in my life had that. Not close. A roofer has a few months' wages in the bank and a van that's failing. That is the arrangement. And now I had this money that came out of the fight, the money I was right about. And I could not touch it. I couldn't. Because every time I thought about spending it on something, on anything, on a car or a holiday or a bloody new sofa, what I heard in my head was my brother's voice saying, "That's all it ever was to you, and if I spent it, then he was correct, and I was the man he said I was." So it sat there, earning about 1.5%, which is another kind of insult. Now, I want to be very clear about something, because people hear Norwegian man, 63, Philippines, and they think they already know the story. They think lonely old fool wants a young wife. I did not go looking for a wife. I want that on the record. I went looking for a project. That's how it started. Sitting in that chair, in the dark, at 62 years old with a dead shoulder and a bank account I hated. I thought, I need something to measure. I need a problem with a shape to it, that I can walk around and inspect and solve. And I found one. I just didn't understand, for a very long time, what I was actually measuring. So, the project. I want to explain how my head works, because otherwise the rest of this doesn't make sense, and you'll just think I'm another sad old man who fell for a pretty girl on the internet. Maybe I am. But that isn't how it started. When a customer rings me up in Norway and says, "Björn, my roof is leaking. What will it cost?" Do you know what I don't do? I don't give him a number. Never. Any roofer who gives you a number on the telephone is either lying or stupid, and often both. What I do is I come out, and I go up, and I look at the whole thing. The flashing, the valleys, the battens under the slate, which is where the truth always is. And then, only then, I tell you what it costs. You don't enter a job you haven't measured. So when I decided, sitting in that chair in the dark, in January, that I was going to look for a woman abroad, I did not open a website and start sending messages. God, no. That would be standing in the road, looking up at the roof. I spent 9 months looking at the roof. First I read everything, all the disaster stories, the Thailand ones, the Vietnam ones, and the Philippines ones, hundreds of them, on forums and on YouTube, probably including this channel actually, which is a funny thing to say out loud. Men who lost everything. Men who sold their house in Manchester and ended up sleeping in a room in Angeles City with no ticket home. And I did what I've done my whole life with a bad roof. I looked for the common failure. Because when 4 houses on a street all leak, it isn't 4 different problems. It's one bad contractor. And the common failure, as far as I could see, was this. These men were emotional. Every one of them. They felt something, and then they acted, and they never once measured. They arrived in the country lonely, and they made decisions with the lonely part of the brain. So my system was simple at the start. Don't be emotional. Be a roofer. Why the Philippines? People always ask me this, and they expect something romantic. The beaches, the smiles. No. English. That's it. That's the entire reason. I looked at Thailand. Beautiful. But I sat and thought about a man of 60-something in a room in Pattaya, and everybody around him talking, and the whole room laughing at something, and him sitting there with a smile on his face like a dog, not understanding a single word. And I thought, that is a man on a roof with no harness. He cannot see where his weight is. I can't learn Thai. I'm 63. I'm dyslexic, and my English is what you're hearing, which I learned from Scottish scaffolders and dubbed American television. But in the Philippines, they speak English properly. The nurses, the shop girls, the taxi drivers. I thought, there, I can hear. I can ask a question and understand the answer. I can verify. That was the plan. That was the whole logic. And I want you to remember it, because it comes back later, and it makes a fool of me. Then I built the spreadsheet. I know how it sounds. My nephew, the one who doesn't speak to me, he would laugh himself sick. But I had nothing else, you understand? I had the flat and the shoulder, and the whole day, every day. And I made this thing my job. 5:30 in the morning. Coffee. Laptop. Spreadsheet. Filipino Cupid, mostly. Christian Filipina, because I thought that would filter something, which was naive. I'll come to that. And 3 Facebook groups. Foreigners meeting Filipinas, that sort of thing. And I logged them. Every profile I looked at, I put a row in the sheet. 9 months. 1,040 rows, if we're being precise. And if I'm not precise, then what am I? The columns. City. Province. Separately. Because Manila is not Bacolod, and Bacolod is not some barangay in Samar, and I learned that fast. Age. Age gap to me. Children. How many? And the ages. Because a woman with a 15-year-old has a different problem than a woman with a baby. Stated employment. Whether the stated employment was plausible. Photo count. Whether the photos were consistent. Same room, same lighting? Or was it 7 photos that looked like 7 different women's lives? Response latency, meaning how many hours before she replied, and did that change once I stopped replying fast? And then the column I was proudest of. Messages before money. That's what I called it. MBM. I counted for every conversation I had. And I had a lot over those 9 months. I talked to maybe 80 women without any intention of meeting any of them, which, yes, I know what that makes me. We can come back to that. I counted how many messages passed before money entered the conversation. Not a request, necessarily. Just an entrance, a mention of a bill, a sick auntie, a phone that broke. And here's the thing. Here is the thing that I still think is true, by the way, that I'd still defend to you today. There is a pattern. The median in my data was 31 messages. 31. The amateurs came in fast. 8 messages. 10 messages. My mother is in hospital. And you delete and move on, and honestly, you almost feel insulted. The better ones took 40, 50. Some clustered by region. I'm not going to name provinces because I don't want to slander an entire island on the basis of my little Excel file, but there were clusters, and anyone who's done this seriously knows there are clusters. And the phrasing repeated, word for word sometimes, from women who had never met each other. I had a filter for that. Certain sentences went straight in the bin, So I built the filters and I ran them. And I rejected, I don't know, hundreds of women I never spoke a word to because a number in a cell said no. Whole human beings, gone, because of a formula I wrote at 6 in the morning in my underwear in Trondheim. I was very pleased with myself. That's the honest part. One was sitting in a dark flat, with no family, no wife, no job, no body that worked, and I had one thing. I was the only man doing this properly. I was correct. Everybody else was a fool, and I was correct. You understand what I was really doing there? I couldn't have my brother back, and I couldn't have my knees back, but by God I could be right about something. Then, month 9, Maricel, Bacolod, Negros Occidental, 38 years old, eldest of 5, a nursing graduate. Passed her boards, actually. No, that's wrong. She hadn't passed her boards. She'd graduated and never sat them, and that detail matters later. Working the night shift in a BPO, a call center, taking complaints from Americans about their internet. Not a beauty queen. That's another thing that people don't believe. She had a plain, tired face and a gap in her teeth. And in her first photograph, she is standing in front of a mercury drug in a work polo shirt, squinting. I put her in the sheet, row 800 and something. And I ran my filters on her, and she came through clean. I want to be precise here because this is the moment, and I've thought about this moment more than any other. She didn't beat my system. She didn't trick it. She genuinely, honestly came through it clean, every column. And she went on coming through it clean for a very long time. My system worked exactly as designed. That's the problem. 7 months. That's how long it was. From the first message to the day I got on the plane. 7 months of talking to a woman I had never touched, never smelled, never stood next to. And I want to walk you through it slowly, because this is the part where my system did exactly what it was built to do. And I still ended up here, talking to a camera. The first message I sent her was 4 lines long. I remember it because I wrote it, deleted it, wrote it again. I asked about the mercury drug in the photo. I asked, was that her workplace, or was she just standing there? Not clever, not charming. I have never in my life been charming. She wrote back 9 hours later. I logged it. Response latency, 9 hours, which was good. The fast ones worried me. And she said no. She was buying paracetamol for her father, and that a friend took the picture as a joke because she looked so annoyed. That was it. That was the beginning of it. Now, the night shift. She worked the BPO in Bacolod 11 at night to 8 in the morning, taking calls from Americans in Ohio who couldn't get their router to work. Which meant her break, her proper break, the 1-hour one, was around 3 in the morning, her time. 3 in the morning in Bacolod is 9 in the evening in Trondheim. You understand what that did to me? I had nothing in my evenings. Nothing. I had the television and the wall and the neighbor's television through the wall. And now at 9 o'clock, every night, my phone would go, and there would be this woman sitting in a stairwell somewhere with fluorescent light on her face and a plastic cup of instant coffee, and she would say, "Björn, good evening. Did you eat? Did you eat? Every night. Kumain ka na ba?" She taught me that one. 7 months of that. 200 nights, maybe more. And I want you to look at my spreadsheet during that period because it's important. Messages before money. My best column. The one I was so proud of. Median 31, remember? At message 300, nothing. Not a mention. Not a sick auntie. Not a broken phone. Not a hint. At message 600, nothing. At message 900 and something, I stopped counting because by then I was a man having a relationship and not a man doing research, and the column had become, I don't know, an embarrassment, like a hard hat you're still wearing at the dinner table. And here's the part that one want the young men to hear, if any young men are watching this, which I doubt. She gave me things. That's what broke the machine. Not asking. Giving. 3 months in, a parcel arrives at my flat in Trondheim. An actual parcel, with the customs sticker, which cost her money to send. And I know exactly what her salary was because I asked and she told me. About $18,000 a month. Call it 3,400 kroner, $320 for 9-hour night shifts. And in the parcel is a knitted hat. Brown. Terrible, honestly. She had knitted it herself, and it did not fit my head. It sat on top of my skull like a small animal, and she made me put it on for the camera, and she laughed until she had to put the phone down. And a bag of coffee from Bacolod, and a photograph, printed, of rain running down a window. Because I'd told her once, one time, months before, and she'd remembered, that the thing I missed most about the roofs was rain that wasn't cold. You cannot put that in a column. I sat there in my kitchen with a hat that didn't fit, and I understood, in a distant way, that my whole system was built to detect one thing coming in one direction, and the thing that would get me was going to come from somewhere else entirely. I want to be fair to her. I've had a long time to be unfair to her, and I've done plenty of it, and I'll do a bit more before we're finished. But right now, I want to be fair. She was the eldest of 5. In the Philippines, that isn't a fact about birth order, it's a job title. Her mother ran a sari-sari store off the road in Talisay. You know these, the little shop in the front of the house, the cigarettes sold one at a time, the sachets of shampoo hanging in strips. Her father had been a sugarcane worker until his kidneys started going, though I didn't know about the kidneys yet. That comes later. One brother had a hobble-hobble, the motorbike taxi. A cousin in Dubai sending home balikbayan boxes twice a year. And Maricel had a nursing degree she'd never used, because she finished it, and then there was no money for the board exam review, and her sister needed school shoes, and the years just went. She was the pipe that everything drained through. That's not manipulation. That's an eldest daughter in Negros. There are millions of them. She prayed. Really prayed, not for show. She'd say things like, God has a reason, we don't see the whole plan. And in the beginning that irritated me. I'm Norwegian. We go to church twice, for the christening and the funeral, and both times we're asleep. I thought it was soft, simple. And then, somewhere in month 5, I stopped finding it simple, because I noticed that this woman, who had every reason to be bitter, was not bitter. And I, who had a bank account and a pension and a hat that didn't fit, was the most bitter man in Trøndelag. Now, here's the thing I've never said out loud, and it's not about her, it's about me. Around month 4, she asked me, in a light way, just talking, the way you do, whether I had savings. And I said, yes, some savings. 1.2 million kroner, about $115,000, sitting there earning 1.5%, doing nothing, helping nobody, existing purely as a monument to a fight I had with my brother in a kitchen. I told myself it was prudence. Very good, Björn, very sensible. You're the man who measures twice. You don't show your hand. But that was the first lie in the thing. Mine. Not hers. And I want that on the record, too. Because when people tell these stories, they always start the clock at the moment. The other person deceived them, and my clock starts earlier than that. I lied to her, and then for the next 3 months, I sat in a dark flat in Norway, waiting for a woman to call me at 9 o'clock so that somebody would ask if I'd eaten. Message 1,000 and something. Column still empty. And then her father missed dialysis, and she missed 2 calls. And the column filled up all at once. She missed 2 calls. That's how I found out. Not a message saying my father is sick, send money. 2 missed calls, and then a text at 4 in the morning, her time saying, "Sorry, Björn, I am at the hospital. I will explain." And when she explained it like a woman apologizing for the inconvenience. Her father's kidneys had been going for 2 years. 2 years. She had never mentioned it. Not once in 7 months. Dialysis, 3 times a week, at a center in Bacolod. And the family had been paying for it out of the Sari store, and her brother's habal, and her salary. And they had run out. I said, "How much?" She said, "Björn, no, please. That is not why I talk to you." And I sat in my kitchen in Trondheim at 9 in the evening, with the rain going sideways against the window, and I felt something I had not felt in, I want to say 4 years, but honestly, longer than that. I felt useful. I said, "How much?" 18,000 a month, about 3,400 kroner, $320. For a man's life, every month, $320. She refused it 3 times. I want you to hear that properly, because when I tell this story to Norwegians, they always say, "Ah, she played you." And I say, "She refused it 3 times, and I had to argue with her for 4 days. And on the 4th day, she cried and said yes, and then she went and lit a candle at the cathedral in Bacolod and sent me a photograph of it." Was that real? I've had a year to think about it, and I still don't know. That's the honest answer. I think it was real. I also think she knew exactly what she was doing. And I think both of those can sit in the same woman, at the same time, without either one being a lie. Anyway, that was the first money. Stage 1, if we're doing this like a job sheet. P18,000 a month. Standing order, through Wise, because the fees are better than Western Union. And I'd researched that too. Of course I had. And I was proud of it. That's the thing nobody understands. I wasn't sad about the money. I was proud. For the first time since my mother died, that account was doing something other than sitting there reminding me that my brother thinks I'm a thief. Stage 2 came about 6 weeks later, and I brought it up myself. That's important. She didn't ask. The nursing boards. She had the degree and never sat the exam. No money for the review course. And then the years went, and now she was 38 and answering phones for Americans about routers. The review course in Bacolod was P45,000. Call it 8,500 kroner. $800. I pushed it on her. I said, "This is not for you. This is an investment. When you are a nurse, you will earn triple, and you won't need me for the P18,000. And then we are both free." Very Norwegian, that argument. Very sensible. She cried again. She said, "Nobody has ever thought I would finish anything." And then I booked the flight. 3 weeks. Trondheim to Oslo, to Doha, to Manila, to Bacolod, 31 hours. And I stepped out of that little airport in Chile, and the heat hit me like walking into a wall of wet wool. I'm a Norwegian. My body does not know what 34 degrees with 80% humidity is. My shirt was through in 4 minutes. And the smell, diesel and burnt sugar and something frying, and a rooster somewhere, at 2 in the afternoon. Roosters don't care what time it is there. And she was standing at the barrier in a yellow dress, and she was exactly, precisely, the woman from the screen. I need to say that clearly. This is where most of these stories turn, isn't it? She's 20 kilos heavier. She's 15 years older. There's a husband. No, she was her. same gap in her teeth, same tired face. She saw me and she put her hands over her mouth and she didn't move, and I had to walk to her. 3 weeks. The house in Talisay, off the highway, up a lane with a basketball court at the end where boys played until it was too dark to see the ball. The Sari Sari store at the front, the sachets of surf and shampoo hanging in strips, cigarettes sold one at a time. Her mother, who was maybe 2 years older than me and looked 75. Karaoke every single night from somewhere, always the same songs, and I complained about it. And now, sometimes in Trondheim, I put those songs on. The welcome dinner. 40 people. 40. Lechon, Pancit, San Miguel in a bucket of ice, and every one of them knew my name before I opened my mouth. Björn from Norway. Tito Björn. Kuya Björn. Children I'd never seen touching my hand to their forehead. Manopo, that's the blessing. You give it to elders. And me standing there like a lamppost, not knowing what to do with my arm. 40 people at a table who knew my name. 2 Christmases in the dark. And then 40 people at a table who knew my name. You want to know how a man loses 150,000 kroner? It isn't the money. It's that. It's a woman's aunt putting more rice on your plate when you didn't ask for it. And the roof. God help me, the roof. Her mother's house had a corrugated iron roof that was... I went up. Of course I went up. 3 days in, 63 years old with a dead shoulder. Up a bamboo ladder in that heat. And Maricel screaming at me from below in Hiligaynon, which I didn't understand, and didn't need to. The fixings were rusted through. The whole eastern slope was held on by nothing but its own weight and habit. One good typhoon. I could not stop thinking about it. 41 years of my life. And here is a roof that is going to kill somebody. And I have money in a bank in Norway earning 1.5%. Then the baptism. Her sister's boy. And they asked me to be ninong, godfather. I understood it was an honor. I did not understand, and I want to be exact here, because this is the whole story. I did not understand that it was not an honor. It's a contract. Utang na loob, they call it, the debt of the inside, and the padrino system runs through everything there. And when you stand at that font, holding a baby in a white gown, in a church in Talisay, with the ceiling fans going and 40 people watching you, you are not receiving a gift. You are signing school fees, weddings, hospital bills, for life. That is what ninong means, and nobody told me. And to be fair to them, nobody told me, because to them it is like telling a man that water is wet. I stood there holding this baby. He was screaming. And I thought about my nephews, the 2 of them, who I taught to fish, who don't answer the telephone. And I thought, fine, all right, fine. The 3 weeks cost me about $120,000 all in. The fiesta contribution, the pasalubong I brought, and the pasalubong I hadn't known I needed to bring and had to buy at the SM there. The doctors, the little things, 22,000 kroner, $2,000. I flew home in June, and I sat down in my flat in Trondheim, and I looked at the chair I'd been sitting in for 2 years. And the flat was quiet in a way it had never been quiet before. Because before, it was just quiet. Now it was quiet compared to something. 14 months, that flat was quiet like that. I'm going to move quickly through this part, because it was slow. That's the trick of it, you understand. The disaster isn't fast. The disaster is 14 months of a man being reasonably happy. I went back in September for a month. Then again in January. In between, Trondheim, and the 9 o'clock calls, and the winter coming down like a lid. The money settled into a shape. Around November, We stopped pretending each thing was a separate thing, and I put it on one payment, P25,000 a month. Call it 4,700 kroner, about $450. That covered the dialysis and the youngest sister's tuition at a college in Bacolod, and stock for the Sari store. You'd be amazed how little stock that shop turned over. They were buying shampoo sachets in quantities of 30. $450 a month. I want to be precise about this because people hear these stories and they imagine a man being bled dry. My pension is decent. Norway is Norway. P25,000 a month did not hurt me. It didn't even scratch me. And that's the trap, isn't it? If it had hurt, I would have measured it. Instead, I experienced it as, what's the word? As being needed. I've turned that over a lot. Being needed and being used. Where's the line? I still don't know. I know a man who has nobody who needs him will pay almost anything to be needed by somebody, and I know that a woman with 5 people to feed knows what that man is worth. Both true. Neither one a crime, exactly. Then, the house. That was mine. That was my idea. And I want that on the record, because that's the biggest number in this story and nobody asked me for it. I could not stop thinking about that roof. The rusted fixings, the eastern slope held on by habit. Every time it rained in Trondheim, I thought about the mother in that house with a typhoon coming, and I'd think about the fact that I was a roofer for 41 years, and I have money doing nothing, and there is a bad roof over an old woman's head, 10,000 kilometers away. And what exactly am I saving this for? The nursing home? So I said, let's build, not repair. Build. A proper bungalow, hollow block, decent trusses, a roof I would put my name to. Now, here is where you're all shouting at the screen. Foreigners cannot own land in the Philippines. I know. I knew. Do you understand? I knew. I am the man with the spreadsheet. I had a whole document about this. Article 12 of their Constitution. A foreigner may own a condominium unit, up to 40% of a building. A foreigner may not own land. Full stop. Not with a wife, not with a company, not with a clever lawyer in Makati. There are structures, and the structures fail. And I'd read about the structures failing. The lot was family land, titled to her mother. It would stay titled to her mother. I would build a house on land I could never own, with money I could never get back, for a family I was not legally connected to in any way at all. Pete 150,000 for the build, about 160,000 kroner, $15,000. And I sat in my flat, and I looked at that number, and I did the maths, properly, coldly, like a roofer, one last time. And I want to tell you exactly what I decided, because this is the most honest thing I will say today. I decided the risk was not the money. I decided the risk was dying alone. $15,000 against 40 people who know your name. $15,000 against the chance of a Christmas with the lights on. If I lose it, so what? I still have 950,000 kroner. I still have the pension. I am not a man who can be ruined by this. That is a rational trade with full information, and I made it. And I would like everyone watching to sit with that for a second, because it's much more frightening than being tricked. I wasn't tricked. I priced it, and I bought it. First tranche, 300,000 falls, cement, blocks, the foundation, and the local men to dig. I sent it in March. I've got photographs. Her nephew sent them every week. The trench, the rebar, the first course of block. All of it under a sky like a wet sheet. And a small dog asleep in the sand pile in every single picture. Same dog. Never moved. I was happier that spring than I'd been in 10 years. Not exaggerating. I had a project again, and it was a roof. But there were 3 things. The first, her documents. We'd started talking about, not marriage exactly, but the shape of the future. Because a tourist visa is 30 days, extendable, and you can stretch it to 3 years if you keep paying, but eventually you're just an old man renewing paperwork in a queue in Bacolod. The 13A is the marriage visa, and that's the real one. That's permanent residency, and that requires, well, marriage. So I asked, in an ordinary way, one evening, what documents will we need? Birth certificate. Sinamar. That's the certificate that says you've never been married. Everyone in that country knows what a Sinamar is. I'd read about it. Of course I had. And she said, yes, I will get it. And a month later I asked again, and she said, the PSA office is very slow, Björn. And a month later she changed the subject, and she did it beautifully. That's the thing. She was very good at it, and I only see it now. She'd start talking about the house, or her father, and I'd follow, like a dog after a stick. Twice. The marriage conversation died twice, and both times I let it. I think about that a lot. Not the lie. My own reaction. I asked, and I got nothing, and I did not push. Me, a man who has been on roofs with contractors trying to hide rotten battens under fresh felt, and I know exactly what a man looks like when he doesn't want you to look at something, and I did not go up the ladder. The second thing, her younger sister posted a photo on Facebook for someone's birthday, tagged a name I didn't know, and Maricel scrolled past it fast on the call and laughed at something else. I noticed, and I put it away. And the third thing was that I stopped opening the spreadsheet. I want you to hear that. Somewhere around month 16, I stopped opening the file. Didn't delete it. Just stopped. It sat on the desktop of that laptop for months, 1,040 rows of a system built by a man who no longer existed. The roof went on in the autumn, 16 months in. Blue metal sheeting, correct pitch, correct fixings, because I specified every one of them from Norway at 6 in the morning with a coffee, and I was so bloody pleased with myself. And then I decided, in February, that I would fly out a week early and surprise her. Just show up. Not tell anybody. Because after 41 years, you don't take a man's word for the work. You inspect it when he isn't expecting you. I flew in on a Thursday. Told nobody. Manila, then the little propeller plane down to Bacolod, and I remember thinking on the descent that the sugar cane looked like a green sea with roads cut through it, and that I would say that to Maricel later because she liked it when I noticed things about her island. 12 o'clock, middle of the day, the worst heat. I got a tricycle from the highway because I wanted to come up the lane on foot like a normal person, and the driver looked at me, this big, sweating Norwegian with a suitcase, on a lane with a basketball court, and he said, "Tito, you sure?" I was sure. I want to tell you what I expected to find, because it says something about me. I expected nothing. That's the truth. I was not going there to catch her. I was going there because that is what I do. You turn up unannounced, and you look at the work. And if the work is good, you say nothing, and you have a beer with the man who did it. I thought I would walk up that lane and she would scream and drop something, and everybody would laugh at the old Norwegian. I did not find another man. I want to say that clearly, at the start, because I know what you're all waiting for. There was no second boyfriend, no German in the bedroom, no other Kano sending money on a Tuesday. Nothing like that at all. What I found was worse, and it took me about 4 seconds to understand it. The house was finished. My house. The house I designed at 6 in the morning in Trondheim. Blue roof, correct pitch, my fixings, the guttering exactly as I'd specified, because I'd sent them a drawing, and they'd followed it. And the door was open, and inside, in the front room, sitting on plastic chairs with a fan going, were her mother and her uncle and her brother and the youngest sister. Coffee on the table. Papers, actually, some papers. And they were talking. In Hiligaynon. Now, I have to explain this. I've been explaining this to myself for a year. Ilonggo, that's what they speak in Negros. It is not Tagalog. My little app on the phone with the owl, the one I'd been doing 20 minutes a night for 2 years, that's Tagalog. Useless. Completely useless. And I stood in the doorway of the house that I paid for, in the country I chose specifically because they speak English, and I did not understand one single word. Not one word. They saw me, and they stopped. And that's the thing. That's the whole thing, actually. It wasn't guilt on their faces. It was worse than guilt. It was the face people make when a difficult conversation has to be postponed. Politely, kindly. Her mother stood up and got me a glass of water and put a doily under it. Nobody was angry. Nobody ran. Her uncle offered me a chair, and I sat in a plastic chair in my own house, drinking water from a glass with a doily under it, while 4 people who loved me, and I still believe they loved me in some fashion, sat and smiled at me, and waited for me to stop being there. Saving face. That's what they call it. Nobody in that room was ever going to tell me anything directly. Not ever. It would have been rude. I made an excuse after about 40 minutes, and I walked back down the lane, past the basketball court, and I stood on the highway not knowing what to do with myself. And the sister came running after me. The youngest, 18. The one whose tuition I'd been paying for 2 years, $25,000 a month, the college in Bacolod. And she stood on the verge of the highway with the trucks going past, and the dust, and she said, in perfect English, of course, perfect, because she was educated on my money. She said, Tito Björn, they were talking about the papers. I said, what papers? And she told me. Maricel got married when she was 19. Civil ceremony at the municipal hall to a boy from Cadiz who went to Qatar 6 months later as an OFW, a driver, and after 2 years he stopped calling, and after 3 years he stopped sending anything, and nobody in that family has heard from him since. 17 years. He might be dead. He is probably not dead. There is a man somewhere, in Doha or Cadiz or anywhere, who is legally, entirely, permanently married to Maricel. And in the Philippines there is no divorce. None. It is the only country on this earth, apart from the Vatican, and the Vatican is not really a country, it's a museum with a pope in it. There is annulment, and annulment is not divorce. It is a court saying the marriage never validly existed in the first place, and you need a psychologist and a lawyer and a petition and years. The number the family had been discussing in that room with the coffee and the papers was P4 $50,000, 85,000 kroner, $8,000. That's what it would cost, and it would take 3 years, and it might fail, and if it failed, you start again. They had known this the entire time, every one of them, the mother, the uncle, the brother. And Maricel had known it on the first night she called me from the stairwell to ask if I had eaten. The sister was crying by then, and I remember I patted her arm, which is such a stupid Norwegian thing to do, and I said it's all right, and it wasn't. And she went back up the lane. I got a room at a hotel in Bacolod that night. There's a chowking near it. I sat in the chowking at 11 o'clock at night because I hadn't eaten, and I didn't know what else to do under those white lights they have. And there was a family at the next table, a proper big one, 3 generations, all of them shouting and laughing about something, and I sat there with a bowl of congee one didn't touch, and I thought, this is the most alone I have ever been in my life, and I have been alone for 6 years. She came the next morning. Somebody had called her. And here's what I want you to understand, because this is where the story stops being about scams. She did not deny it. She did not cry. She did not fall on the floor and beg, which, I'll be honest with you, is what I'd braced for. She sat on the end of the hotel bed with her hands in her lap, and she said yes. Yes, it's true. Yes, I knew. Yes, from the beginning. I asked her, and I was shouting, I think, or as close as I get. I asked her, why did you not tell me? And she said, because you would have gone. And then she said the other thing, the thing that I hear when I'm falling asleep, still, in Trondheim. She said, Björn, my father would have died. Do you understand? My father would have died, and my sister would have stopped school, and my mother's roof would have fallen in. And I chose. I am the eldest. And she said, I love you. Both of those things are true. I don't know how to make you believe both of them at once, but I have been holding both of them for 2 years, and it was very heavy. And I sat in that hotel room with the aircon rattling and the karaoke coming from somewhere down the street. Always, always karaoke. Some man murdering a Beatles song. And I looked for the lie. 41 years of finding the rot under the felt. 41 years of knowing when a man is showing you a good corner to keep you off a bad one. And I looked at her, and I could not find it. That's what finished me. Not the money. Not the marriage. I wanted a villain, and she handed me a person. I didn't shout at her. I didn't break anything. I think people are disappointed when I tell them that. There's a version of this where I throw a chair through a window in a hotel in Bacolod, and the police come, and it's all very dramatic. No. I sat on that bed, and after a while I said, I need to go home now. And she said, okay. And that was it. That was the end of 2 years. I flew out on my original ticket a week later, and I spent that week in the hotel with the aircon rattling. I didn't see her. I ate at the Jollibee across the road most days because it was the only place I could point at things. 63 years old, sitting under those yellow lights, eating a chicken joy with a plastic fork and a bottle of Coke. Rock Bottom has a strange taste. It tastes of fried chicken and gravy, and it's not even bad. That's the worst part. When one got back to Trondheim, I wrote her one email. 4 lines. Not clever, not charming. I said, I cannot do the annulment. I am not angry with you. I hope your father lives a long time. Please, do not write to me. And she didn't. She never wrote to me again. Not once. And I have to say, that hurt more than anything, because part of me, the stupid part, the part with the spreadsheet, part of me had a theory that if she was a scammer, she would chase. She didn't chase. Now here's the thing I have not told many people. I kept paying. 3 more months. 18,000 a month. The dialysis, straight to the clinic. I set it up so it didn't go through her at all. 3 months, about 10,000 kroner, and I've tried to explain it to myself, and I've got 3 explanations, and they're all rubbish. Explanation 1, I'm a decent man. No, a decent man doesn't need 3 months to stop. Explanation 2, her father is innocent in all this. True, but so is half the world, and I don't pay for their dialysis. Explanation 3 is the real one, and I don't like it. For 3 more months, somebody in the world still needed me. That's it. That's the whole reason. I paid £800. Sorry, $1,000. I'm still doing this in kroner in my head. I paid $1,000 for the feeling of being necessary, and I knew exactly what I was buying at the time, and I bought it anyway. Let me do the accounting. properly, one last time, like a roofer. Monthly support, 20 months, about $470,000. The review course, $45,000. The trips, 3 of them, flights and hotels, and the fiesta and the pasalubong, around $280,000. The house, $850,000. Total, near enough, 265,000 kroner, about $25,000. And what I have left is 950,000 kroner, and a pension that pays my rent. I want to be very clear, because I've watched a lot of these videos now. I am not ruined. I'm one of the lucky ones, and I know it. I got out before the P Ford 50,000 for the annulment, which would only have been the start, because there's the psychologist, and the lawyer's extras, and 3 years, and it can simply fail, and then you're back at the beginning with nothing. I got out before a 13A visa that could never have existed, because you cannot marry a woman who is already married. That's bigamy. That's a criminal offense in that country. I would have been 66 years old standing in front of a judge in Bacolod. I got out because of a Thursday, and a tricycle, and an 18-year-old girl with a conscience, standing on a highway with the trucks going past. So, the pattern. That's what you came for, isn't it? The title says 1,000 profiles. Here it is. The pattern is not who asks for money. That's what everybody looks for, and it's what I looked for, and it is genuinely there. I found it. The median of 31 messages, the clusters, the copied sentences. All real. Any man can build that filter. It will catch the amateurs. The pattern that gets the rest of us is the opposite. It's who never asks. Because the real obligation in that country does not arrive as a request. It cannot. Because a request can be refused. And Filipinos are far too polite to hand a man something he can refuse. It arrives as a knitted hat that doesn't fit. It arrives as a woman asking every night for 200 nights whether you have eaten. It arrives as 40 people at a table who know your name before you've opened your mouth, and as a baby put into your arms at a font in Talisay while the ceiling fans turn. And by the time you notice, you are not being asked for anything. You are volunteering. You're proposing the house. You're pushing the money on her while she refuses it. You are, at every single moment, a free man making his own decisions. That's the trap. It has no jaws. You walk in and you close it yourself. And the men who walk in, I want to say this properly, because it's the only useful thing I've got. The men who walk in are not the greedy ones, and not the stupid ones. They're the ones who are alone. Because a man who has been alone for long enough cannot tell the difference between being needed and being loved. He genuinely cannot. Those two things arrive with the same feeling in the chest, and the Philippines will offer him both at once, sincerely, and leave him to sort out which is which. I've thought about her every day for a year. Was it love? Was it discarte, the hustle, the survival? I think it was both. I think she was an eldest daughter with 5 people behind her, and a father whose kidneys were failing. And I think she loved me the way you love a good roof. Because it keeps the rain off. And because you're grateful. And because you don't examine it too closely in case you find something. And I think both of those were true in the same woman at the same time. And I think I was the only one in the whole story who needed them to be separate. Here's what I do with that. I sat alone through 2 Christmases, rather than pick up the telephone and say sorry to my brother. 2 Christmases in the dark, so the neighbors wouldn't knock. And then I flew 10,000 kilometers and spent 265,000 kroner buying a family. Buying one, when I already had one. I just wouldn't apologize to it. I wrote to Carl in April, my brother, a letter on paper, because he wouldn't answer the phone. I said I was wrong about the money, And I said some other things. He hasn't replied. But he hasn't sent it back either. And I think about that. It's not much of a measurement. But it's something. That was Björn. And before you rush to the comments to tell him what he should have done, sit with the last part of what he just said, because that's the part that matters. There's no villain in this story. That's uncomfortable, and it's true. Maricel is not a monster. She's an eldest daughter in Negros with a dying father and 5 people depending on her, and she made a choice that most of us, in her shoes, cannot honestly swear we wouldn't make. She was also not honest with a man who loved her, and that carries a cost, and he paid it. The structures around them are real. There is no divorce in the Philippines. Annulment runs $300,000 to $800,000 and takes years. And there are millions of women in that country legally chained to men who walked out on them a decade ago. Foreigners cannot own land. Not through a girlfriend, not through a wife, not through a clever company. The OFW economy is built on exactly the expectation that the person who leaves sends money back, and a foreign partner slots into that same shape without anybody needing to say so out loud. Here's what to take away. Ask for the Senumar. Early, plainly, without apology. And if the answer is slow, ask again. Look at the land title before you pour a single bag of cement. Know where the money actually lands and who touches it on the way. And understand what ninong means before you stand at that font. But mostly, notice if you're lonely. Because Björn had the best data of any man who ever flew into that country, and there was no column for it. Thank you for spending this time with us. If this landed somewhere near your own life, we'd like to hear it. The comments below this video are, honestly, half the value of this channel. I'm your host, and this has been Inside the Philippines. Take care of yourselves out there.